Here is what this session covers. Part A, why procurement is not the only source of property. Part B, transfer. Part C, donation. Part D, barter. Part E, confiscation, attachment, seizure, and foreclosure. Part F, production and manufacture. Part G, construction, including by administration. Part H, legal and regulatory basis, consolidated. Part 1, 20 common misconceptions. Part J, 20 pitfalls and corrections. Part K, 20 audit deficiencies. Part L, 15 challenging questions. Notice the shape of this session: 6 separate modes of acquisition, each with its own legal basis, followed by the same misconceptions, pitfalls, deficiencies, and question format you saw in earlier sessions. Next slide. Part A, why procurement is not the only source. Government agencies acquire property through several recognized modes besides purchase, each with its own legal basis and recording requirements. This opening part makes one simple but important point. Procurement is common, but it is not the only way property enters an agency's books, and each of the other modes has its own paper trail. Next slide. The other modes of acquiring government property. Transfer, property no longer needed by one agency, or unserviceable, moved to another government agency without cost or at an appraised valuation. Donation, a voluntary transfer of assets, including goods or services in kind, from a donor to the agency, normally free from stipulations. Barter, a direct exchange of one thing for another, without the use of money, governed by the Civil Code provisions on sale. Confiscation, attachment, seizure, and foreclosure, property that comes into government possession through the enforcement of law rather than through a voluntary transaction. Production and manufacture, property an agency generates itself, such as farm produce, biological assets, or items made in an agency's own workshop or press. Construction, infrastructure built either by a private contractor or by the agency itself, construction by administration or force account. Now, in a bit more detail. This is really the roadmap for the rest of the session: 6 modes, each covered in its own part, each with a distinct legal basis. Try to associate each mode with one identifying detail as we go. Transfer with the JEV requirement, donation with the certificate of acceptance, barter with the civil code, and so on. Next slide. Part B, transfer, moving property that is no longer needed, or is unserviceable, from one government agency to another. This part covers transfer, moving property from one agency, or one accountable officer, to another, including the exact documentary chain the law requires. Next slide. Here is the text of the provision, read exactly as written. Any government property that is no longer needed by an agency or unserviceable may be transferred without cost or at an appraised valuation to other government agencies upon authority of the respective heads of agencies. In a bit more detail, notice the phrase, without cost or at an appraised valuation. The law gives agencies flexibility on price, but not on documentation. Whichever option is chosen, the transfer still has to go through the same formal approval and paper trail. Next slide. Procedures for transfer. The transferring agency's property officer prepares an inventory of the property no longer needed, then documents the transaction in a property transfer report, PTR, with a full description, cost, and other relevant details. The transfer must be approved by the heads of both the transferring and the receiving agencies, or their duly authorized representatives, before it may proceed. The receiving agency must require appropriate receipt of the items transferred, evidenced by a signed PTR. A copy of the transferring agency's journal entry voucher, JEV, must be attached to the receiving agency's copy of the PTR. This is the documentary basis for the receiving agency's own recording in its books, not the PTR alone. Now, in a bit more detail, walk through this 5-step sequence in order, because auditors check it in order. Inventory, prepare the PTR, secure approval from both agency heads, require proper receipt, and attach the sending agency's JEV. Skipping the last step is the single most common error in transfer transactions. Next slide. Warning: a property transfer report alone is not enough to record a transfer. Recording a transferred asset in the books based solely on the property transfer report, without the transferring agency's JEV attached, is a documented recurring error. The JEV establishes the transferring agency's own derecognition entry and the cost or carrying value the receiving agency should use. The PTR by itself only evidences the physical handover. In a bit more detail, this warning targets a very specific and very common shortcut: recording a transfer based only on the receiving agency's own paperwork. Always ask for the sending agency's journal entry voucher as well. Without it, the receiving agency has no independently verified basis for its own entry. Next slide. Part C. Donation. Voluntary transfers of property to the agency, and the acceptance step that makes a donation valid. This part covers donation, and specifically why a delivery receipt and a deed of donation are not, by themselves, enough to record a donated asset. Next slide. What a donation is, and why acceptance matters. A donation is a voluntary transfer of assets, including cash or other monetary assets, goods in kind, and services in kind, that one entity makes to another, normally free from stipulations. A donation is not automatically complete upon delivery. It becomes valid only upon acceptance of the donation by the donee agency, evidenced by a certificate of acceptance, or equivalent deed of acceptance. Recording a donated asset in the books based only on a delivery receipt and the donor's deed of donation, without a certificate of acceptance from the donee, is improper, since the acceptance is what perfects the donation. Now, in a bit more detail, the core idea to internalize is that the donation is a two-sided legal act, not a one-sided delivery. The donor's deed of donation is only half of what makes it valid, the donee's acceptance is the other half, and without it, there is no completed donation to record. Next slide. Caution. Check for the certificate of acceptance before booking a donation. Before a property or supply officer forwards documents for a donated item to be recorded, the file should already contain the deed of donation from the donor and a certificate of acceptance signed on behalf of the agency. A delivery receipt showing the item arrived is not, by itself, proof of a completed donation. In a bit more detail, make this a standing checklist item. Before any donated item goes into the books, physically confirm the certificate of acceptance is in the file, not just the donor's deed of donation and a delivery slip. Next slide. Part D. Barter. Direct exchange of property without money, governed by the Civil Code's provisions on sale. This part covers barter, a mode many people assume is informal, but which is actually a defined contract under the Civil Code with its own documentation expectations. Next slide. Here is the text of the provision, read exactly as written. By the contract of barter or exchange, one of the parties binds himself to give one thing in consideration of the other's promise to give another thing. In a bit more detail, the key phrase is, one thing in consideration of the other's promise to give another thing, no money changes hands at all, which is exactly what separates barter from an ordinary sale. Next slide. Barter in government property transactions. Barter may be resorted to when a government agency exchanges property directly with another government agency, government-owned or controlled corporation, or other party, without the use of money. As to matters not specifically addressed by the Civil Code's provisions on barter, the transaction is governed by the Civil Code's provisions on sale, meaning ordinary sale concepts such as warranty against eviction apply by analogy. For government property, a barter transaction should still be documented with the same rigor as any other acquisition or disposal, a written agreement identifying both properties exchanged, their appraised values, and the approving authority on each side. Now, in a bit more detail, even though no money is involved, do not let that fool you into thinking barter needs less documentation than a purchase. If anything, it needs more, because there is no invoice to anchor the transaction, the appraised values and the approving authority on both sides have to be documented independently. Next slide. Part E. Confiscation, attachment, seizure, and foreclosure. Property that comes into government possession through the enforcement of law rather than a voluntary transaction. This part covers property that arrives through enforcement of law rather than a voluntary transaction, confiscation, attachment, seizure, and foreclosure, and the crucial distinction between custody and ownership. Next slide. How property enters government custody through enforcement. Confiscated or seized property comes into government possession as a result of the enforcement of law. For example, goods seized by the Bureau of Customs for violations of customs law, or items confiscated by law enforcement in the course of their duties. Attached property is property placed under the custody of a court or an authorized officer, pending resolution of a case, pursuant to a writ of attachment. Foreclosed property comes into government possession where a government financial institution or agency forecloses on collateral securing an unpaid obligation. In each case, the property does not become a recognized agency asset merely by coming into physical government custody. The applicable law or rule governing that specific enforcement action determines when and how it may be recognized, forfeited, or disposed of. Now, in a bit more detail, the pattern across all three of these, confiscation, attachment, and foreclosure, is the same. Physical custody happens first, and legal recognition happens later, only once the specific legal process concludes. Never let the sequence get reversed in your own recording. Next slide. Tip: do not treat custody as ownership. Property that is merely in an agency's physical custody because of an ongoing enforcement action, a pending forfeiture case, an unresolved attachment, or a foreclosure still subject to redemption, should not be recorded as an owned asset of the agency until the applicable law's process for final forfeiture, confirmation, or consolidation of title has actually been completed. In a bit more detail, this is a genuinely tricky distinction because physically, the item is sitting in your warehouse either way. The test is not where the item is, it is whether the legal process, forfeiture, confirmation, consolidation of title, has actually concluded. Next slide. Part F. Production and manufacture. Property an agency generates itself rather than acquires from an outside source. This part covers production and manufacture. Property an agency generates itself, rather than acquires from an outside source. Next slide. Recognizing self-produced and manufactured property. Some agencies generate their own property through production, for example, an agricultural research center's seedlings grafted from its own stock, or a livestock program's offspring from agency-owned breeding animals. Where property is produced from a biological asset already recognized in the books, such as seedlings grafted from an agency's own mango tree, the addition is recorded as a change in fair value due to physical change, at its market value at the point of recognition, not treated as a purchase or a donation. Manufacture covers items an agency's own workshop, press, or production unit creates for its own use or for issuance to end users, and should be costed and recorded based on the actual materials, labor, and overhead the agency incurred. Now, in a bit more detail, notice the two different valuation approaches here. Property produced from an existing biological asset gets a fair value adjustment, while manufactured items get costed based on actual materials, labor, and overhead. These are not interchangeable methods. Use the one that matches how the item actually came to exist. Next slide. Part G. Construction. Infrastructure built either by a private contractor under a procurement contract, or by the agency's own personnel. This part covers construction, with particular emphasis on construction by administration, or force account, and the specific conditions that must all be met before an agency may build a project itself. Next slide. Construction by contract versus construction by administration. Construction by contract, the ordinary route, where an infrastructure project is competitively bid out and built by a private contractor under RA number 12009 and its IRR. Construction by administration, force account, the agency undertakes the project itself, using its own personnel, equipment, and materials, without engaging a private contractor. An implementing agency undertaking a project by administration must have a track record of having completed or supervised a similar project costing at least 50% of the project at hand, and must own or have access to the necessary tools and construction equipment. No contractor may be used, directly or indirectly, for works undertaken by administration. Doing so defeats the purpose of the by administration route. Now, in a bit more detail, the rule to remember cold is the one about contractors. No contractor may be used, directly or indirectly, for work classified as by administration. If a contractor is involved at all, the project is not by administration, full stop. Next slide. Peso thresholds for construction by administration. A project costing 20 million pesos, 200 pesos, or less may be undertaken by administration or force account by the implementing agency concerned. A project costing over 20 million pesos may be undertaken by administration only in specific cases. Emergencies from natural calamities, compliance with government commitments, failure to award a contract after bidding for valid cause, termination or rescission of contract, or areas with critical peace and order problems. For these higher cost exceptions, prior authority is required from the Secretary of Public Works and Highways for projects between 20 million pesos and 50 million pesos, or from the President of the Philippines, upon the Secretary's favorable recommendation, for projects exceeding 50 million pesos. Now, in a bit more detail. There are really 3 tiers here, not one. At or below 20 million pesos, an agency may generally proceed. Between 20 and 50 million, the DPWH Secretary's prior authority is required. Above 50 million, the President's approval is required, upon the Secretary's favorable recommendation. Next slide. Warning: a project's cost alone does not automatically justify construction by administration. A project costing 20 million pesos or less is within the general threshold, but the implementing agency must still independently satisfy the track record and equipment or tools requirements. Meeting the peso threshold and meeting the capability requirements are 2 separate tests. Both must be satisfied, not just the cheaper of the 2 to prove. In a bit more detail, this warning corrects a very natural but incorrect assumption that meeting the peso threshold is the whole test. It is only half the test. The agency's own track record and equipment capability must also be independently verified. Next slide. Part H. Legal and regulatory basis. The primary issuances underlying each mode covered in this session. This part consolidates every legal citation used throughout the session into one place, for quick reference. Next slide. Consolidated legal and regulatory basis. Presidential Decree No. 1445, Government Auditing Code of the Philippines, Section 76, Transfer of Property between Government Agencies. Civil Code of the Philippines, Republic Act No. 386, Articles 1638 to 1641, Barter or Exchange. GAM for National Government Agencies, Volumes I and II, Recognition and Documentation Requirements for Donations, Transfers, Production, and Manufacture. GPPB Resolution No. 018-2006, as amended by GPPB Resolution No. 020-2020, Conditions, Thresholds, and Approving Authorities for Construction by Administration, Force Account. Now, in a bit more detail. Notice how these 6 modes draw from 6 very different bodies of law: the Government Auditing Code, the Civil Code, General Accounting Standards, and a specific GPPB resolution for construction. That range is itself worth remembering. Other modes of acquisition really is a distinct legal topic, not a footnote to procurement law. Next slide. Part 1. 20 Common Misconceptions. Each entry pairs a commonly held but incorrect belief with the accurate rule and its legal basis. This part tests your understanding by presenting 20 commonly held but incorrect beliefs about the other modes of acquisition, each paired with the accurate rule. Next slide. 20 Common Misconceptions. Number 1. Myth. A donated asset may be booked as soon as the delivery receipt and deed of donation are on file. Fact. A donation is not valid, and should not be booked, without a certificate of acceptance from the donee agency. Number 2. Myth. A property transfer report alone is sufficient basis to record a transferred asset. Fact. The receiving agency's recording should be based on the transferring agency's JEV, attached to the PTR, not the PTR alone. Next slide. 20 Common Misconceptions. Number 3. Myth. Only the head of the receiving agency needs to approve a property transfer. Fact. The transfer must be approved by the heads of both the transferring and the receiving agencies, or their duly authorized representatives. Number 4. Myth. Barter of government property is not recognized under Philippine law. Fact. Barter is expressly recognized under the Civil Code, which governs it as a contract analogous to sale. Next slide. 20 Common Misconceptions. Number 5. Myth. Property seized or confiscated in law enforcement automatically becomes an agency asset upon custody. Fact. Custody alone does not establish ownership. The applicable enforcement laws process for final forfeiture or confirmation of title must first be completed. Number 6. Myth. Attached property under a pending court case may be booked as agency property immediately. Fact. Attached property remains under the custody of the court pending resolution and should not be recorded as an owned asset before the case is resolved. Next slide. 20 Common Misconceptions. Number 7. Myth. Property produced from an agency's own biological assets, e.g., grafted seedlings, should be treated as a purchase. Fact. Such production is recorded as a change in fair value due to physical change, based on market value, not as a purchase. Number 8. Myth. Items manufactured in-house by an agency's own workshop need not be separately costed. Fact: manufactured items should be costed and recorded based on the actual materials, labor, and overhead the agency incurred. Next slide. 20 common misconceptions. Number 9. Myth: any infrastructure project may be undertaken by administration if the agency simply prefers to do it itself. Fact: construction by administration requires the implementing agency to meet specific track record and equipment or tools requirements, regardless of preference. Number 10. Myth: a project's cost being 20 million pesos or less is by itself sufficient to justify construction by administration. Fact: meeting the peso threshold and meeting the capability requirements, track record, tools or equipment, are separate tests. Both must be satisfied. Next slide. 20 common misconceptions. Number 11. Myth: a contractor may assist with parts of a project being undertaken by administration. Fact: no contractor may be used, directly or indirectly, for works undertaken by administration. Number 12. Myth: projects over 20 million pesos can never be undertaken by administration. Fact: they may be, but only in specific enumerated cases and only with the required prior authority from the DPWH Secretary or the President, depending on cost. Next slide. 20 common misconceptions. Number 13. Myth: the other modes of acquiring property are rare exceptions that agencies almost never encounter. Fact: transfer, donation, barter, production, and construction by administration are all recognized, regularly used modes with their own established documentation trails. Number 14. Myth: a verbal agreement between two agency heads is enough to complete a transfer of property. Fact: the transfer requires documented approval from both heads of agency and a signed property transfer report. Next slide. 20 common misconceptions. Number 15. Myth: donations always come with no conditions attached. Fact: donations are normally free from stipulations, but a donor may attach conditions, which the agency must be able to comply with before accepting. Number 16. Myth: property acquired through non-procurement modes does not need to go through inspection. Fact: property received through transfer, donation, or barter is still subject to the agency's normal receipt and inspection controls before recording. Next slide. 20 common misconceptions. Number 17. Myth: barter transactions do not need an appraised value on either side of the exchange. Fact: government property barter transactions should be documented with the appraised value of each item exchanged, along with the approving authority on each side. Number 18. Myth: the property officer alone can approve a transfer of property to another agency. Fact: approval must come from the heads of agency, or their duly authorized representatives, on both sides of the transfer. Next slide. 20 common misconceptions. Number 19. Myth: foreclosed property automatically appears on the agency's books the moment the foreclosure sale occurs. Fact: recognition depends on completion of the applicable process, such as consolidation of title, not merely the occurrence of the foreclosure sale. Number 20. Myth: construction as a mode of acquisition always means competitive bidding with a private contractor. Fact: construction includes both construction by contract and construction by administration, force account, each with its own applicable rules. Next slide. Part J. 20 pitfalls and corrections. Recurring operational weaknesses in how the other modes of acquisition are documented and recorded. This part shifts from beliefs to behavior. 20 recurring operational mistakes actually seen in how these modes are documented, and the specific correction for each one. Next slide. 20 pitfalls and corrections. Number 1. Pitfall: a donated item is booked based only on a delivery receipt and deed of donation. Correction: withhold booking until a certificate of acceptance from the donee agency is on file. Number 2. Pitfall: a received property transfer report is recorded without the transferring agency's JEV. Correction: request and attach the transferring agency's JEV before recording the transferred asset. Next slide. 20 pitfalls and corrections. Number 3. Pitfall: a property transfer proceeds with only one agency head's signature on the PTR. Correction: secure approval from both the transferring and the receiving agency heads, or their duly authorized representatives, before the transfer is treated as final. Number 4. Pitfall: a barter transaction is completed with only an informal exchange, no written agreement. Correction: document every barter with a written agreement stating both items exchanged, their appraised values, and each side's approving authority. Next slide. 20 pitfalls and corrections. Number 5. Pitfall: seized or confiscated items are recorded as agency property immediately upon physical custody. Correction: wait until the applicable enforcement law's forfeiture or confirmation process is completed before recognizing the item as an asset. Number 6. Pitfall: property produced from an agency's own biological assets is recorded as a new purchase. Correction: record it as a change in fair value due to physical change, at market value, consistent with its origin from an already recognized biological asset. Next slide. 20 pitfalls and corrections. Number 7. Pitfall: items manufactured in-house are recorded at an arbitrary or estimated value. Correction: cost manufactured items based on actual materials, labor, and overhead incurred. Number 8. Pitfall: an agency proceeds with construction by administration without verifying its own track record. Correction: confirm and document a track record of having completed or supervised a similar project at least 50% of the current project's cost before proceeding. Next slide. 20 pitfalls and corrections. Number 9. Pitfall: an agency undertakes force account work without owning or having access to the required tools and equipment. Correction: verify ownership of, or documented access to, the necessary construction tools and equipment before starting. Number 10. Pitfall: a contractor is quietly engaged to help with part of a force account project. Correction: keep force account work entirely in-house. Engage a contractor only through a properly bid, separate contract. Next slide. 20 pitfalls and corrections. Number 11. Pitfall: a force account project over 20 million pesos proceeds without the required higher authority approval. Correction: secure prior authority from the DPWH Secretary, P20M P50M, or the President, over P50M, before proceeding. Number 12. Pitfall: property received through transfer or donation skips the agency's normal inspection step. Correction: route all received property, regardless of acquisition mode, through the same inspection and acceptance controls used for purchased items. Next slide. 20 pitfalls and corrections. Number 13. Pitfall: a donation with conditions attached is accepted without checking the agency's ability to comply. Correction: review any conditions attached to a donation and confirm the agency can comply before accepting. Number 14. Pitfall: the property officer signs off on a transfer without a written designation of authority to do so. Correction: confirm the signing officer's authority is properly delegated and documented before processing the transfer. Next slide. 20 pitfalls and corrections. Number 15. Pitfall: records for biological asset-derived property fail to note the parent asset they came from. Correction: cross-reference newly recognized production items to the specific biological asset or agency source they were derived from. Number 16. Pitfall: foreclosed property is added to the books before title has actually been consolidated. Correction: record foreclosed property only once the applicable legal process for consolidation of title is complete. Next slide. 20 pitfalls and corrections. Number 17. Pitfall: a barter's appraised values are set unilaterally by only one of the two exchanging parties. Correction: document an appraisal or valuation basis agreed to, or independently verifiable, on both sides of the exchange. Number 18. Pitfall: force account project files omit the required certification of the agency's track record and capability. Correction: maintain the track record and capability certification as a standing part of the force account project file. Next slide. 20 pitfalls and corrections. Number 19. Pitfall: a property transfer report omits the description and cost details of the item. Correction: complete the PTR with a full description, cost, and other relevant details before routing it for approval. Number 20. Pitfall: confiscated property is disposed of by the agency before the applicable enforcement law's process is finished. Correction: hold disposal until the specific law governing the seizure or confiscation authorizes disposition. Next slide. Part K. 20 audit deficiencies. Findings typically raised concerning the other modes of acquisition, matched to the provision each violates. This part presents 20 audit findings in the exact style you will see in a real audit observation memorandum, each tied to the provision it violates. Next slide. 20 audit deficiencies. Number 1. Deficiency: donated asset booked without a certificate of acceptance from the donee agency. Number 2. Deficiency: transferred asset recorded based solely on a property transfer report, without the transferring agency's JEV. Next slide. 20 audit deficiencies. Number 3. Deficiency: property transfer executed without documented approval from both agency heads. Number 4. Deficiency: barter transaction completed without a written agreement documenting both items and their appraised values. Next slide. 20 audit deficiencies. Number 5. Deficiency: seized or confiscated property recorded as an agency asset before completion of the applicable forfeiture process. Number 6. Deficiency: property under an unresolved court attachment recorded as an owned agency asset. Next slide. 20 audit deficiencies. Number 7. Deficiency: self-produced property, e.g., grafted seedlings, recorded as a purchase rather than a change in fair value. Number 8. Deficiency: manufactured items recorded at an arbitrary value instead of actual materials, labor, and overhead cost. Next slide. 20 audit deficiencies. Number 9. Deficiency: construction by administration undertaken without documented proof of the agency's required track record. Number 10. Deficiency: construction by administration undertaken without documented ownership of, or access to, required tools and equipment. Next slide. 20 audit deficiencies. Number 11. Deficiency: a private contractor engaged, directly or indirectly, for work classified as by administration. Number 12. Deficiency: false account project over 20 million pesos undertaken without the required prior authority from the DPWH Secretary or the President. Next slide. 20 audit deficiencies. Number 13. Deficiency: property received through a non-procurement mode not subjected to the agency's normal inspection controls. Number 14. Deficiency: donation accepted with conditions the agency has no documented ability to comply with. Next slide. 20 audit deficiencies. Number 15. Deficiency: property transfer processed by an officer without documented delegated authority to sign. Number 16. Deficiency: production-derived property records lacking cross-reference to the parent biological asset or source. Next slide. 20 audit deficiencies. Number 17. Deficiency: foreclosed property recorded in the books before consolidation of title is legally complete. Number 18. Deficiency: barter appraised values set unilaterally, with no documented basis on the counterparty's side. Next slide. 20 audit deficiencies. Number 19. Deficiency: false account project file missing the required track record and capability certification. Number 20. Deficiency: confiscated property disposed of before the governing enforcement law authorized its disposition. Next slide. Part L. 15 challenging questions. A mixed format comprehension check, true or false, error spotting, multiple choice, and short scenarios, for self-testing at an advanced level. This final part is a genuine comprehension check. 15 challenging questions in a mix of formats, designed to test whether you actually understood the material. Next slide. 15 challenging questions. Number 1. Q. True or false? Under Section 76 of PD number 1445, a property transfer between agencies always requires payment of the appraised value. A. False. Transfer may be made without cost or at an appraised valuation, at the discretion authorized by the respective heads of agencies. Number 2. Q. Spot the error. A donation is complete and may be recorded once the donor's deed of donation and the delivery receipt are on file. Correct the statement. A donation is not complete, and should not be recorded, without a certificate of acceptance from the donee agency. Next slide. 15 challenging questions. Number 3. Q. Multiple choice. Barter of government property is governed, as to matters not covered by its own civil code title, by the provisions on A. Donation, B. Agency, C. sale, D. Lease A, C. Article 1641 of the Civil Code applies the provisions on sale to matters not specifically addressed under barter. Next slide. 15 challenging questions. Number 4. Q. Scenario. A property arrives at an agency's warehouse as a result of a pending customs forfeiture case that has not yet concluded. May it be booked as an owned asset? A. No. Physical custody during an unresolved enforcement action does not establish ownership. Recognition awaits completion of the applicable forfeiture process. Number 5. Q. True or false. Seedlings grafted from an agency's own mango tree and recognized in the books should be treated as a purchase transaction. False. Such production is recorded as a change in fair value due to physical change, based on market value, not as a purchase. Next slide. 15 challenging questions. Number 6. Q. Spot the error. Any government project may be undertaken by administration so long as its cost does not exceed 20 million pesos. What is missing from this statement? Meeting the peso threshold alone is not sufficient. The implementing agency must also independently satisfy track record and equipment or tools capability requirements. Next slide. 15 challenging questions. Number 7. Q. Multiple choice. A force account project costing 35 million pesos requires prior authority from A. The Commission on Audit, B. The Secretary of Public Works and Highways, C. The GPPB, D. No prior authority is required, A. B. Projects between 20 million pesos and 50 million pesos require prior authority from the DPWH Secretary before proceeding by administration. Number 8. Q. True or false. A contractor may lawfully assist with a portion of a project classified as construction by administration. False. No contractor may be used, directly or indirectly, for works undertaken by administration. Next slide. 15 challenging questions. Number 9. Q. Scenario. An outgoing property officer transfers duties to a successor without securing a property accountability clearance. What is the deficiency? The transfer is incomplete. Clearance for property accountability must be secured by the outgoing officer as part of the transfer process. Next slide. 15 challenging questions. Number 10. Q. Spot the error. Property acquired through donation or transfer is exempt from the agency's normal inspection controls since it was not purchased. Correct the statement. Property received through any non-procurement mode remains subject to the agency's normal receipt and inspection controls before recording. Number 11. Q. True or false. A barter transaction requires only one party to prepare a property transfer report, since the exchange is mutual. False. Each party to a barter prepares and transmits its own PTR as evidence of its side of the exchange. Next slide. 15 challenging questions. Number 12. Q. Multiple choice. Which of the following is not one of the recognized other modes of acquiring government property discussed in this session? A. Barter. B. Production and manufacture. C. Competitive bidding. D. Transfer. A. C. Competitive bidding is a mode of procurement, not one of the other non-procurement modes covered in this session. Next slide. 15 challenging questions. Number 13. Q. Scenario. A well-functioning machine is transferred from another department based only on the receiving agency's own property transfer report, with no supporting document from the sending agency. What is missing? The transferring agency's journal entry voucher, JEV, must be attached to the receiving agency's copy of the PTR to serve as the basis for proper recording. Number 14. Q. True or false. A donation to a government agency may lawfully be accepted with conditions attached, provided the agency can comply with them. True. Donations are normally free from stipulations, but a donor may attach conditions the agency must be able to comply with before accepting. Next slide. 15 challenging questions. Number 15. Q. Spot the error. Foreclosed property may be recorded in the agency's books as soon as the foreclosure sale takes place. Correct the statement. Recognition depends on completion of the applicable legal process, such as consolidation of title, not merely the occurrence of the foreclosure sale. Next slide. End of session 3.